First, I want to thank again everybody for attending the symposium. You've been great audience, both yesterday and today. Great speakers. I think all the sessions were very stimulating for different reasons. So I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope we can repeat the same next year. We're going to conclude today and the weekend with a keynote presentation by Tobias Berger. Very much looking forward to it. Tobias is the head of art at Kwun, the newly opened Center for Heritage and Arts in Hong Kong. And I'm pretty sure most of you have gone and visited. If not, I highly recommend it. It's really a fantastic center for art, a Kunsthalle, but also more than that, there is so much heritage in the place that it's really a great addition to the cultural landscape of Hong Kong. Kwun produces, Tobias and Kwun and his team produced a visual art exhibition at the Kwun Contemporary, a 1,500 square meter contemporary art space designed by Herzog de Meuron, as well as an extensive education and public art program. Again, exhibition they just opened in June, but some great exhibition and some great public program, and you must follow what they do. They're really very important for the ecosystem here. Tobias Berger worked as a curator at the Museum Friedrichianum in Kassel until the end of 2001. In 2002, he was artistic director of the 8th Baltic Triennial of International Art in Vilnius, Lithuania. Between 2003 and March 2005, he was director of Art Space NZ in Auckland, New Zealand. And from April 2005 to December 2008, he was executive director of Parasite Art Space in Hong Kong. And from 2008 to 2010, chief curator at the Namjoon Pike Art Center in Seoul, South Korea. From 2010 to 2015, Tobias was curator of visual arts at M+ in Hong Kong. So fantastic experience in the region. And so without further ado, I welcome Tobias on stage. Thank you for coming today.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Yes, okay, great. I thought I looked so good when Magnus was sitting here on the chair and doing the talk, so I will try the same. It's also kind of nice because it's not really keynote. It's more like, I mean, the great thing about all these wonderful galleries in town are certainly all these gallery dinners you have to participate in. And you always sit there and talk and you have these kind of ideas. And this is basically a summary of a lot of these ideas which you kind of exchange. First of all, certainly, thank you for the Art Gallery Association. Thank you to Adriana and Angela and Katharina and Fabio. But also, and I love that, there is actually 2 President Emeritus, which is Henrietta and Katie. And I was like, wow, I want that on my business card. It just really sounds good. I am not talking about feminism in Hong Kong art as originally announced. I also will not talk about the challenges of censorship in a changing political world. However, I will only talk 20-25 minutes. So if you have questions for about feminism in Hong Kong art or challenges in censorship, I'm happy to answer them afterwards. I put together a selection of slides. So if you get bored by my talks, there's always something in the back to look at. There are about 80 slides of our last 6 shows. As Fabio said, we have just opened only in last May and then continues on. So these are more or less in chronological order. The talk is a little bit about the question we all ask ourselves in these times is like, how the hell did we get where we are at the moment? And it is pretty challenging, and therefore I will talk a little bit about basically the history of the 90s and so on, how that whole globalization happened, or how I perceive that it happened. I think everybody has a different idea about it. And then I will talk a little bit about Daegun and why we are doing what we are doing, and I hope you guys have some questions later on. So let's start really where these whole 2-3 conversations, I think, almost started. It was in the 1990s. And I would think that actually that's in the 1990s, that was really the time when the art world changed, when the art world globalized. And I think in that time, a very, very important book by Marius Barbiers was called In the Center of the Periphery. And it was about how all these, the periphery became the new, became important and so on. And what we completely missed in the 90s was really the idea that we actually could have multiple centers. And I think now we live really in this multi-centered society where we don't have like Paris in the 1900s or New York in the 1960s. We really have different centers. And I think that's something very, very, very valuable. It's also a completely new circumstance. And everybody who was in Shanghai last week has seen this amazing new place that just 5 years ago wasn't there. And I think that that the speed and also the importance of these new centers is really beautiful. I think also, what actually happened in the 90s? I think, first of all, certainly there was first Japan, then Korea, then China. It was a huge booming economy. And we talked about that, but I remember that in 1989, which was a very important year in retrospective. But in 1989, I remember that the Japanese bought actually a painting of Van Gogh, the Sunflowers. And I looked it up because I just wanted, it was in 1989, they paid 40 million US for it, for the Sunflower painting. And it really made a huge wave, not only because it was a huge price for a painting. In that time, it was the most expensive painting ever sold. But it also made very clear that now there is a new center, there's a new interest in Japan or in Asia for art. And I think that was very important. And the other thing from my perspective growing up in Germany in that time was certainly that in 1989 the wall came down and Eastern Europe completely fall apart. And so you had almost, everything in the east of Europe from from Poland to all the way over to Asia becoming that new territory. But also in that time, and I think I want to mention it because his name comes up with so many bad negative associations at the moment. But there was this investor called George Soros, who now everybody knows. But George Soros started in 1989 to set up different open society centers all over Eastern Europe. In every town, in Vilnius, in Riga, in Warsaw, and so on, there would be that center, mostly run by a very middle-aged, young, very energetic person, mostly woman, and they all connected. And George Soros, by connecting all these people through this open society, really managed to create one of the nicest and most important networks for not only contemporary art, they did a lot of contemporary art, but also for an intellectual discourse and so on. And I think that is one of these things that always get forgotten, these amazing networks that got built by certain people. But then, so these students, and mostly from the ex-Russian Empire, but also from Korea, Japan, and so on. So all these students came actually to the Western art schools. And I think that's also one of these things people underestimate, that it's not all about the big organizations. It's really like little ants, that people that come, and then the amazing thing is a lot of them stayed in Europe and in America, but actually a lot of them went back, right? And they took this knowledge, and it's not about bringing Western art to the East. It's basically a knowledge about how do you make art, how do you make contemporary art, and how can you use it for your own local circumstances. And I think that this back and forward between Asia, between Eastern Europe, and so on was really what accelerated this new international art world. And to prove that, I remember in 2009. There was an exhibition, in 2009 I was living in Korea, and there was a big important exhibition at the LA MoCA exhibition, and it was called Your Bright Future, and it had 12 Korean artists in it, and they were really the best Korean artists. And of these 12 Korean artists, only one artist did not study somehow in the West and came back. So that was really kind of the proof that this kind of exchange and so on works very well. And it's still very important. And the other thing is, besides the art schools, there were certainly, I think the same happened with design, but also it happened with these curator schools, where in the Apple or in Goldsmiths or in London or in Bard College in New York, people just came, learned a lot of techniques and went back to that. So that was one of the main accelerators for this crazy internationalization of contemporary art. And then certainly at the same time, and you probably all think, why is he not talking about, the international biennials happened, right? And they happened before. Sydney actually started, was the first big one outside of Venice and Carnegie, started already in 1973, but it's not only when do these biennials start, but you have to really look into the program, when do they become international. And Sydney only really became international in 1990 when René Bloch went there and did a show called The Ready-Made Boomerang. And the same happened in Havana. It's also from 1986, very, very important, I guess, for the South American art scene. Istanbul Biennial, it's also the same story, right? It was founded in 1987, but then only in 1992, 94 with Wasif Korten and then René Bloch. It really internationalized, and for Asia, certainly the main biennial, Gwangju Biennale in Korea. Very important also from the history. I mean, built not only as a biennial, but also to commemorate the democracy movement. So a biennial as a sculpture, as a public sculpture, a very beautiful idea actually. And that started in 1995, the first one, and they went global from the beginning. And I remember they had also in the beginning these amazing visitor numbers, because in that time every student in Gwangju had to go to the biennial. So they had like 750,000 people for the first and the second edition. But Gwangju certainly became really that heart of international biennials here in Asia, and then certainly Taipei and other ones started. But I think what happens with all these biennials, they started almost small, quite local, but quite provincial. And then after a very short time, they went international. And again, this wonderful exchange happened. And what we also shouldn't forget is that Biennales brought a completely new idea of what can art be into the open, right? Mostly before, art would be considered as even in the 1980s, 90s, sculpture and painting and so on. But because the biennials were so open, a lot of people could work site-specific. A lot of people could do these huge installations that were impossible to do in that time anywhere else. A lot of people could do very site-specific work, very conceptual work. Performance became important. So there's actually a lot of artists, I think, and arts that wouldn't be possible or wouldn't be that quickly possible without these biennials. And if you look around, like, I mean, artists like Li Bull or Li Kid or even Xiao Fei, who we now exhibit at the moment, these are all artists that had first the chance to show at the bigger biennials and then could basically develop further. So I think that was an important thing. And with that Biennale certainly came that idea of the traveling curator, that all were kind of walking, was connecting to each other. The big hero here for everybody, I guess, is Harald Seemann, who did the Documenta 5 in 1972, which was kind of the first world exhibition. Certainly it was a completely American, European, Western exhibition, but it was really the first one who showed what was possible. And but Harald Seemann then again becomes very, very important for the region here, because he had this idea in the 1980s to found Aperto in the Venice Biennial, including basically that big group exhibition, which didn't exist before the 1980s. And then in 1999, Harald Seemann invited all these Chinese artists and brought this huge boost of Chinese art into the world, more or less, certainly with the help of people like Oli and Lawrence and so on. But these were really, really important parts of how this whole thing happened. China works a little bit, talking about China, that's a good one. That worked differently. I would state, and I think that's also, I think if you read the books and so on, it is there are different Chinese art times, and I'm sure a lot of people here will discuss that later with me, but there is really a time before 1989, before Tiananmen, which was basically started, I would state, by the Star movement, which is now 40 years old, and where artists, which was a very idiosyncratic art scene in China, and that changed completely after 1989, where this idiosyncratic art market was very difficult, probably very challenging, and then the international art market or certain collectors started coming to China, living in China. That's when I guess that's when Uli Sieg started, when Ulanz came to China. I mean, Ulanz came to China to found the Weight Watchers, which is kind of a fantastic idea. But he also had a sugar factory, so he was hatching his sugar factory with the sugar, which is great. I mean, talking about how do you hatch something. The Ulanz came to China, and so in the 1990s we have this amazing, almost but commercial interest into China, and that's what I think is very, very important if you think about the Chinese and later about the Hong Kong art world. Is that I would state that when I grew up, and most people in America and the West, art came to us through public institution. It was really, art was something for education. It was of the betterment of the appreciation of art and beauty and knowledge and so on. It was really a public good. While I think that art in China and later again in Hong Kong really came through the market. It really came because there were no institutions, and so it really came through gallerists that did amazing works over in Shanghai and in Beijing and in other places. And the roots of especially contemporary art in China and are very, very different than the ones in Europe. And I think that's something we are only in the middle of. We only have understood slowly what happened with these different markets and how on the one side they are different, but then through all these art fairs and so on, we just have heard that they also somehow have to come together. And I think a lot of also misunderstandings at the moment and misconceptions by both sides are rooted really in that idea that it really comes from very, very different ideas and different parts of it. And I actually think also, I mean, having worked with M+, which was one of the greatest times in my career, but I think really that is looking at my Western colleagues in having museums and so on, I think that completely change of the art market and what does it mean to collect art changes at the moment dramatically, and I think most of the especially Western museums have not grasped yet what it means to be part of this big global art market, because 20-30 years ago museums were the only ones that showed big installations or that bought big paintings, and nowadays they have to compete with all these amazing international collectors, and the whole environment of that has changed. Funnily, the museum collections have not changed at all. And that was why I think that acquisition of M+, of the complete web archive and the future works of Yang He-Chang Heavy Industry, which was finally completed, I think, half a year ago, is such a great new step, because finally museums start to understand that their jobs and their places in society is dramatically changing, and that they really have to think is like, what are we? How do we collect, and what do we collect in the 21st century? And now back to now we are in M+. So let's think about Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, and Magnus said it, and I'm sure it was the topic of the last 2 days. I mean, Hong Kong really got hit when the art fair Art Hong Kong opened. I think I totally never believed that Hong Kong was a cultural desert, because there were always amazing artists there. There was always a very good music scene. There was a lot there already. People were just a little bit lazy and didn't want to go over to Kowloon, and the cattle depot was a bit too far, and Tan was, out of the world. But no, there was always amazing art and culture here in Hong Kong. It wasn't a desert, but it was water was not so easy to find. Let's say it that way. And Hong Kong is also, it's a little bit a challenge at the moment. And I think if you look, and we are here at the Art Galleries Association, I think if you look back in history, certain galleries really almost define an area, right? I mean, if you look at Leo Castelli in the 60s, 70s, who was basically defined pop art, and but not only pop art, but what was New York like in that time? And you think about Castelli, right? You think about certainly Mary Boom, Metro Pictures, Angela Rosen with all these great artists in the 1990s, or how White Cube with the YBAs with Sarah Morris, Damien Hirst, and so on, completely defined an era of a city, right? These galleries are really very, very closely connected to these areas of the city. And in China, we had certainly Shang Art and Shang Art, who basically monopolized the Shanghai art market for 2 decades. And we have Long March space in Beijing, but we also here had Johnson, and if you look, Johnson Chang with Hennard, and if you look at his gallery, I think it really, having all these amazing Chinese artists, bringing them in, having these amazing Hong Kong artists, he has also struggled, like the city, with that understanding of what is Hong Kong now, where are we in Hong Kong, and what is Hong Kong, and what is Chinese art, and how do we act with that? And nowadays, if you talk about contemporary, and unfortunately, I don't know, is Emmanuel here, or did he leave? So okay, I can talk about him. No, no. I mean, the funny thing now, where are we now? We are talking about how you define a time and a space through a gallery, and if you think about the now, and it's not about the 18 spaces in 10 cities Emmanuel has opened, but actually it's about the Instagram. It's about Instagram, and I mean, he has the course has 1.4 million Instagram followers. JR has 1.2 million Instagram followers, and Takashi has about 950,000 Instagram followers. So we are talking about 4 million Instagram followers that are daily connected somehow with Perrotin Gallery. And just, this is where we are now, right? We are not in that city or anywhere. We were somewhere in these connecting, and I'm sure that Takashi will work hard so he has more Instagram followers than JR and so on. But it is really the new idea of what is locally, what's identity, and I think that is really, really important. So, but we are certainly challenged with all the big galleries coming in. And I mean, I think art or contemporary art is really the most outstanding individual sign or expression of individualism and identity. And I think that is really important, that there is a connection, and we talk about identity in art and in the art market, and that's really something that is very difficult if you have so many foreign galleries here that don't really reflect that identity. And it is not only a local identity we are talking about, which is very, very important. It's about that move from identity, but also to dignity, meaning that the individual has basically certain ideas and needs, and also wishes to be heard and to be taken serious in a bigger society. And I think that is really the idea also of contemporary art, that move from the bigger, larger society towards an individual, and then towards really the certain interest groups of very, very small interest groups. That's the wrong word, but doesn't matter. I think, but if you look back, I think, again, a little bit globally, that is really what the last 50 years have defined, right? And it started with not a minority or something at all. It started actually with the women's movement. And funnily, basically, Van Gogh painted these sunflowers that were sold to the Japanese almost in exactly the same year as New Zealand, which was the first country that allowed women to vote. Started, the women could vote from 1893 in New Zealand. It was the first country that allowed women's movement. And so these movements are very, very important. And these are the movements actually, also these connections, I think, these ideas about identity and how do we identify as a place with galleries, with art spaces, and with the art that is happening here. And that is, I think, one of the really the struggles we are in at the moment, because it is, on the one side, we have these big contemporary art galleries, which are wonderful, and I love them all to be here because we see amazing art, they bring in amazing people and so on. But how much do Hong Kong or a Hong Kong society connect to an international gallery like a Perrotin, White Cube, and so on? And I think that is why it is almost that is why we have to go back and think, what did we actually have before these galleries? And we had these places, and Magnus was talking about them. We had Parasite, we had 1A spaces, so we had 1/8 space, we had Videotage. I take Asia Art Archive a little bit out of it because it, from the beginning on, was a much more global project. But it was important to have these spaces, and I think to wrap all that up, that is, I think, why we now decided, when we thought about Daegun, and especially Daegun Contemporary, which is the visual arts part of Daegun, to go back to that local and to really look back into that local identity and what does it mean to do a local, or to do an art space or an art center in a local discourse, and how can we help that local discourse to grow and to develop further. And it's certainly a little bit paradox to talk about a public space in a former prison and a former police station and a former magistracy, which was basically, as you know, it was a closed space. It was that closed island in the middle of Central. And that is why I think that one of the best things or most important decisions that were made when the Jockey Club took over Daegun, which wasn't called Daegun at that time, it was 3 different places, the Central Police Station, the Central Magistracy, and Victoria Prison, was to hire actually Herzog de Meuron and Purcell for the heritage. But Herzog de Meuron understood from the beginning onwards that this whole place is really about connecting. And there were, on the one side, it was very clear that they had to connect the police station and the magistracy and the prison, which were fenced off by barbed wire together. So there was a huge internal project, but also that they had to connect this place, this island, with the community around it. And that's why they put all these 8, I think we have 8 entrances now. But it's not only the entrances that go in and out. I think it's also, the idea is, what are you as an institution, and do you want to be, who are you there for? And I always like the idea to be that neighborhood museum, to be that museum around the corner. Okay, we are not a museum, but that art space around the corner where people just go from the community, and that's really what we want to serve. So that was from the beginning onwards the idea of Daegun, but also I think of Daegun Contemporary, to be there for Hong Kong and for the Hong Kong artists, but also for the wider public. And Daegun and Daegun Contemporary, we never had, or we never have, the idea of being, we don't want to be the tourist place, or we don't want to be, on TripAdvisor or something like that. But we want to be that place where, if anybody has guests, right, or guests in town, sure, that we want to be the first one they come to visit and they're proud of. And funnily, that worked. As Fabio said, we opened 3 months ago on the 25th of May. Daegun had about, I think we have 1.1 or 1.2 million visitors by now. Daegun Contemporary, again, which is the art center you saw it in the first picture. We are a small art space of 1,500 square meters, and we had about, I think, 230,000 people. These are for art spaces incredible numbers. You all know that. But also most of the people that came didn't come for the arts. I talk about that in a minute. They just came because we have a very beautiful staircase. That's one of the things. Talking about Daegun Contemporary, I think what is great, I mean, again, the Jockey Club makes it possible that we are free of charge. That helps a lot. So people really can just walk in. There's no threshold of paying. And paying actually, it doesn't matter if you take $5, $10 like the Museum of Art, or if you take $100, it is that big threshold that cuts down about 50% of people. We are non-collecting institutions. Sorry, gallerists, I'm not buying art anymore. I'm very happy about it, but we are showing art, so that's maybe also nice. And we are non-commercial, as you know, which is really important. And that is maybe also for the discussion later. We are a presenting institution. That means that from the beginning onwards, it was very clear that we, as Daegun or Daegun Contemporary, are not doing our own exhibitions. We always have to work with other partner institutions. They can be local, like Spring Workshop, which we did the first exhibition with, or they can be international, like UCCA, who we work with now. So we have to always work with these institutions to bring exhibitions to Hong Kong, which is a great challenge, because we can work with all these amazing people together, and you will not be bored by seeing the 10th exhibition curated by Tobias Berger. But on the other side, it's a challenge, and it's a lot of work, and it's quite interesting. But it's interesting, what's more interesting actually in that job is what I just said. 85% of the people who come to our space have never been to an art space, I think. Or maybe it's 60, 70%, but it's a huge number. And it's not like if you go into a gallery or a museum, everybody knows they are going in there for an art experience. While my visitors, they come in and see something like that, and they're like, oh, what the hell is that? So for us, we knew that from the beginning. So for us, education was super important. But we also learned. For example, we did these amazing brochures, almost a book for dismantling the scaffolding, which everybody could take, and where all the descriptions and all the things for the audience is basically in. But then I was sitting in the exhibition, and I looked at my audience, and people were taking that book, but nobody was reading it. And I was thinking, why do people not reading that book? And only then I realized, and they also walked around the exhibition a little bit like they walk in Sogo or in a department store or duty-free shop. I mean, so they were just, and only then did I realize most of my public doesn't even understand at the moment that art needs explanation, that you actually get smarter by doing, by reading a bit. As more you know, as more you see. I mean, that's really in art, it's more. And so now we started to do wall text. So it's really even more in your face. And we did, instead of doing brochures, we do individual sheets. And that works much, much better. But it's also, I think, it's really nice to have that job. We have these amazing gallery guides. So we have our gallery guards are not gallery guards, but gallery guides. So they talk to everybody. They're very communicative. And that's wonderful, because we can also train our gallery guides and guards to do something. But not only do we do that, but we basically have two strands of education. One is this really basic, what is contemporary art? And we actually have a brochure that says what is contemporary art, because most people don't know what is contemporary art or how to read it. And then we do this very high-end, education, where we have every Friday we have a concert. We have music performances. We have a summer academy, which is really it's like a postgraduate program. So we really go, on the one side, we go into the very basic teaching of the appreciation and knowledge of art, but on the other side, we really try to add something for professional development. I think that works very well. I think I know you all have seen every exhibition we did, which reminds me, the biggest problem in art center, not the biggest, but one of the biggest challenges we have at the moment is that we cannot communicate all our events anymore. Facebook has killed the ideas of listings. There is no time out anymore. There's no, there's this nice idea of looking into the paper and see what happens. Doesn't work anymore because Facebook killed it. But now nobody looks at Facebook anymore. So we have really challenges communicating to our audience. So the only chance, unfortunately, to see everything we do is to basically like Daegun Contemporary and not Daegun, because these are two different sites, on Facebook, because also Daegun has so much to do and so many things to promote. It's really difficult to get that all out, but it's also a great challenge. And it's also certainly absolutely beautiful to be able to do all these things. I have like, what, 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay. Why did we do what we did? I think it was important. I mean, when I started, I talked about identity and so on. So it was important in the beginning to work with a local curator, with Christina Lee, and with a local organization, Spring Workshop, for the first exhibition. It was important, thank you, there, to see Wing Po So, an artist that never had a show before, to give her, not only to bring her in, not only because she grew up just the street next to where we are, but also to give her the chance to produce a new artwork and to really work with her together to make a show, make that show possible. It was important to do these open calls again, to work with Hong Kong curators, to bring in other aspects of Hong Kong curating, other ways of looking at Hong Kong, and also to work on these productions. And that is really the beauty of this project, but also the biggest joy is we are not a museum. We are not doing big retrospectives, but we are also not a commercial gallery. We are something in between, and we should really be that platform that gives artists the possibility to do things they cannot do in a museum and they cannot do with the commercial galleries. And this is production. It's really production of big installations. It's production of installations that you cannot sell. It's doing things which, yes, that work unfortunately had to go to the bin after that exhibition because it was too big to store. But it is not only, and I think what is important and people a lot of time underestimate is that production is not only cash. It's not that we just give these artists whatever, 100,000 Hong Kong or whatever. It is really helping with the infrastructure, helping them with knowing people who can actually produce certain things, with editing things. Where with Wing Po So, she wanted to show 45 works and we cut it down to 6, because it's sometimes important that there is a professional team there that can help the artist, and it's kind of a game or a fight to produce amazing works. And so what we do is, and I think what we should do is really produce new works, help the artist and the whole Hong Kong, it's mostly Hong Kong artists, but helps the whole environment to grow and to produce these amazing works like the Chow Fei show we have at the moment, where we produce that amazing video, but also, also let's see what's coming up in the next few years. I'm looking forward to see you all. So it's all about that, and now I take questions if there are some. Thanks a lot. Oh. Since I'm part of the wonderful jockey club, I'm not allowed to do that, but because everything is very regulated. No, we are, I think what's important is, first of all, we also have an artist book library, which I'm very proud of. So we have a collection of about 1,000 Asian artist books, and therefore we will have an art book fair on the 8th of January. So that's going to be super exciting because we have about 30, 40 publishers from all over Asia coming to Daegun and bringing their amazing art publications with them. And then we have 2 group exhibitions. One is together with the Wellcome Trust in London, It's a very great project called Contagious City. And then we do another group show doing the art fair. Because there were a few rules I set down before I started. One was no solo exhibition during the art fair, because I didn't want the wonderful gallerists breathing down my neck. And the other one was that we don't take traveling exhibitions at the moment. So it will be a show curated by Susanne Pfeffer, who just won the Golden Lion in Venice for her amazing German pavilion. We asked her to do a show long when she wasn't known at all yet, but because a wonderful, how do we call it, Building 4 incident or whatever, whenever our wall came down, we are a little bit delayed with our whole program. So these are the two big projects, and then we do two solo exhibitions. We plan about 2 to 3 years in advance, so we are quite planned out already.
Thank you, Tobias. I wanted to follow up on your point on education as well as our environment. So, I mean, in Hong Kong, we're not only Asian, it's also Chinese, and in Hong Kong, we're also very practical. So if I talk to most parents, they will feel that art is more a hobby, rather than a career. So I'm wondering, in terms of Kwun, what it's doing in terms of breaking, those traditions, and how do you see the institution's role here?
I can only talk for Daegun and Daegun Contemporary. I cannot talk for the Museum of Art or M+. In that case, I think for Daegun, it's very clear that if we, let's say it that way. I personally, and I do have young children. I don't think that you should. I think the best time to get kids is when they're like 12 or 14 for contemporary arts, when they really know what's going on. Sure, we have family workshops for younger ones and so on, but I mean, 12, 14, 15, that's when you can F them up. That's when you can really give them a new idea and implement new thoughts in their mind. So we handle it that way, that if we have younger children, we more or less try to do the heritage thing with them, which I'm not responsible for, but my wonderful colleague Winnie Young is doing, because that's also a really important thing, that the kids, especially the younger ones, learn to appreciate heritage and history and learn that. And that's easier in that young age to explain, and then when they're a little bit older, we basically take them from there and try to introduce a little bit of contemporary art into it. But it's not much. It's an age thing, but it's also the whole society. We are there to help people to appreciate, to help the knowledge and appreciation, to enhance the knowledge and appreciation for contemporary art. And again, we are doing that, as I said, two parts, one very basic and one very, very professional. The thing is, we are, I have to say that on an excuse basis, I have 1.5 people for education, and Plus has 18 at the moment. So it's also, I think these smaller institutions like Parasite, like us and so on, I think it's not really their job. I think, honestly, it is, as you say, it's a government's, it's the Museum of Art's job, and it's bigger institutions like M+ and so on later that have to take care of that. We do our best. We had over, I think we had, I don't have the numbers, but we had like 150 education events in the first 2 months. And they really start from Family Day, which we have every first Sunday in the month, to tours, to talks, to high-end professional development like the Summer Academy. Yeah. More questions? Time is up. Everybody go home? No. No? Amazing. I had it all prepared. Yeah, I guess that are there concluding remarks by the Art Gallery Association, together, apart? Yeah. No, thank you everybody for staying here on a long Saturday afternoon. Thanks for inviting. And yeah, Adriana is going to do the closing remarks. I get my stuff together. And I hope to see you all in Daegun or here in next year. Is that what's happening? Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. So we finally reached the end. A few of us are definitely looking forward to our first Sunday without having to plan anything for the symposium, and to actually spend time with our families as well. Numbers don't measure success, but I still think it would be nice for us to share with you some of the statistics over the last 2 days. We've had a record attendance on more than 600 people physically coming to our sessions and performances. This has included a number of guests from overseas, art professionals, collectors, artists, curators, and particularly those seeking to deepen their connection to the art ecology. Online, we've had more than 8,000 followers in China per session. And we've reached, through Artsy, our online partners, more than 600,000 users across the world. We had 3 artist performances and 22 speakers and moderators. These were not only from Hong Kong, but 10 countries and representing 5 continents. More than half of these were women. And we had the participation of 16 member galleries as part of our program. But most importantly is what we heard and what we learned. We had 2 days of insightful and sometimes surprising ideas. Yesterday, we learned anything from the fact that Fidel Castro changed the art world by transforming the axis of biennales, to how Hong Kong has become one of the most powerful platforms for Southeast Asia unconventional artists to present their work. We heard about the challenges of international museums to acquire Asian art and rebalance their collection due to rising prices. In the evening, we witnessed nature's creative force through birds painting and artwork with the beating of their wings. And this morning, we heard the frustration by female artists by the slow progress on balancing gender equality, despite the fact that Hong Kong's commercial and institutional art leaders are in their majority women. We also gained insight into the challenges to reach success by galleries, in particular, the creativity required by mid-sized galleries to deal with a more competitive environment and rising costs. We did not hear about feminism or censorship. However, Tobias did say he loves the wonderful galleries in Hong Kong, and we will be quoting him on that. Sadly, he is not buying anymore. So overall, we are proud and feel that it was a fantastic event. We've thanked over the last 2 days all the organizations that have supported us, but I would like to just make express our gratitude at a personal level. First, to Alice, not only as Executive Director of Asia Society, but as a friend, for your generosity and amazing support, as well as to Cassandra and Stanley from the Asia Society team. We could not have had a more majestic backdrop than the one Asia Society provides. Thank you, William and Fabio, and the rest of the board for months of planning and hard work. But most importantly, thank you to the Hong Kong AGA team for putting up with all of us, for chasing tirelessly everyone that participated in this event, for being the heart and soul of this event. See you next year. And I would just like to introduce Alice, who will honor us with some final remarks.
All right, I'm going to be very short. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank Adriana and Angela, Fabio, and the wonderful Hong Kong AGA team. It's been I think this is our 3rd year of collaborating, and we're really delighted that Asia Society can play a small role in the success of the association. And of course, my unsung hero, I think Adriana already mentioned, the Cassie and Kathy is slightly bigger these days, and I know she's been sitting there but supervising, but I want to thank our program team, Cassie and Stanley, for their wonderful work. But really, my thank goes to all of you it's been really a delight for us here at Asia Society. We open here in this center, although we've been around since 1990, we've opened this center in just about the same time Hong Kong Art Gallery Association was founded in 2012. To see the progress all the changes, and exciting changes. And I think Tobias's talk really is one way to conclude this. We have come a long way, and I think it's going to be another exciting year ahead and more to come. And also 2012, I see Megan, there was also the beginning of Art Basel here in Hong Kong. So 2012 was a really exciting year for all of us, and I look forward to growing with all of you, Asia Society Hong Kong. One of our founders for this site, we also founded, I believe, AAA, Jack had always challenged us to be global, both global and local. And I feel this is something that's an exciting challenge for all of us as we live in this really interesting times. And I think where arts, whether we, art is political and art is really exciting. It's really exciting to see all of you, the galleries, the artists, and the institutions. And I look forward to be part of this journey. And I look forward to working with all of you because Asia Society, we are very, very, very fortunate to have this beautiful space. And we look forward to sharing it with all of you again. And I don't know if Kat is here. I do want to introduce my new colleague, Kat Don, who some of you already know. Kat just joined us as our new arts and cultural development person in charge of our gallery. So Kat, can you make a wave to everyone so that in the future, those of you who worked with us before on the gallery, Kat is an exciting new addition to Asia Society Hong Kong family. And again, thank you all for your patience, your generosity, and we look forward to seeing you at future Asia Society Hong Kong event, as well as future collaboration with the Gallery Association. So thank you.